Which brings us on to our next speaker. Martin Knight is a name, again, familiar to most of you, I'm sure. Martin's an architect, runs his own practice, Knight Architects. And I first came across Martin, I don't know how many years ago, a very long time ago. We worked together on my first bridge, which I'm sorry to say was an aluminium bridge. I don't think I'd do that again now. But there we go. Martin is a well-known bridge architect, but he's much more than that, as I'm sure you're about to hear. And so, having heard from Will, where perhaps most of Will's thinking has been talking about some of the buildings issues, I suspect we might hear more about infrastructure. But let's see. Martin.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you very much, Will. Really challenging, inspiring, extraordinary presentation. I've written a lot of notes through that. The first note says, never follow Will Arnold when giving a presentation. So the theme, obviously, that we're talking about is change. I started my architectural journey 37 years ago in a room somewhere in a building on this site. And 37 years ago, and walking here from where we're staying overnight, I was thinking about change. Three things really stood out. The Hacienda nightclub, which is now a set of apartments. The student union is now the Institute of Sport. And most shockingly of all, Manchester Polytechnic School of Architecture is a business school. So the change or transition from architecture to business is really shocking. I'm going to try and talk a little bit about change, but more to do with behavioural change. Alongside the focus on the climate emergency, I think it's really noticeable that the subjects of competence, professionalism and ethics are included in the headline themes for this symposium, I think possibly for the first time. Now, it's normal for our field of bridge design to be focused on technical issues, design, construction, materials, maintenance, monitoring and so on. And these are obviously highly important to ensure the safety and the durability of what we build. And so we focus on what's referred to as reasonable skills. They're a key component of our duty as designers, and they're typically enshrined in the contract terms that we sign up to. I'm going to leave others to deal with those and to talk about those during the course of this symposium. There's a second part of that duty that we sign up to exercise care. And in the contracts we sign, that's interpreted as being careful, attentive, or cautious. But I don't think we should be cautious. I think, on the contrary, we need to be bold. And as Will has just said, boldness has to come from actions and thinking. So inspired by the theme of construction's role for a world in emergency, I'd like to speculate on what it means if we interpreted care as a verb instead of a noun. So, who cares? And I think, obviously, we all should. Of course, we always should have, but now with the climate and biodiversity emergency upon us and the gulf in social equity greater than ever, both across the world and within countries, it's essential that we all do much more about why we are designing and building, that we care much more about why we are designing and building and who we are doing it for. And before we refine what and how we design and build. In short, why and who must come before what and how. And my apologies if you've heard me champion this before. Elsewhere in the conference, we'll hear from friends and colleagues who are experts in the assessment of embodied or upfront carbon. But it's obvious that we cannot make an omelette without breaking eggs, and even in the refurbishment of existing structures. And a creative approach is needed, such as building one bridge instead of two, to maximise the potential value inherent in the project if we are to justify its carbon footprint. So in considering this value for carbon, like we have long considered value for money, we can use our skills to care for the planet and for future generations. Recently, I was presenting to a group of university students in Delft about bridge design and carbon, when I realized, of course, their generation didn't cause this emergency. They have inherited its massive debt, yet they also have the greatest chance to positively influence change. So they must be inspired and not intimidated or deterred by this challenge. Or put another way, as behavioural economist Rory Sutherland puts it, asking people to do the right thing for the right reason is potentially setting the bar too high. The fact is, we need to inspire each other and the next generation to participate in the joy of great design, which brings equity, opportunity, pleasure to society, and addresses the climate emergency. So gatherings like this one in Manchester and the Future of Design event for young designers, not just engineers please, are essential to educate but also to inspire and to bring joy. The joy of design for me comes from seeing it in use, making people's lives better in ways big and small, planned and unexpected. As an architect practicing in the field of bridge design, which is the acknowledged territory of engineers, I am aware of the focus on function, from which form is supposed to follow, at least in modernist design philosophy, and this order encourages efficient use of materials and should provide solutions that are appropriate to their span and the load carried. But what exactly is the function of a bridge? In my opinion, the function of a bridge is to make people's lives better. This is a much broader and deeper challenge than simply carrying a load safely across an obstacle, which is arguably the minimum measure of performance. A truly successful bridge should also look beautiful. Its design should respect and enhance its place, and after all, for centuries, great cities and communities have been founded upon great bridges, and the design of civil infrastructure is a measure of how a culture values itself and its people. History shows us that a useful bridge should be positioned and aligned to provide the most attractive route to users, and in doing so, it shouldn't make the situation worse for others. It should act as a catalyst for improvement to the surrounding public realm. It must provide socially valuable connectivity, for example, by linking communities with jobs, education, amenities, and nature. And in the age of a climate emergency, and at a time of energy crisis, the function of a bridge must include encouraging modal shift towards energy-efficient forms of mobility, such as rail, tram, and active travel modes, like our Lilla Lidingöbro in Stockholm. Because even while the use of electric cars increases, it's possible or even likely that modal shift will continue to accelerate away from private car use in cities where problems of congestion are unchanged by the power source. These problems remain even when the car is parked, which is obviously most of the time, and a recent advertising campaign by the rental firm DOT really cleverly illustrated how space-hungry private cars are compared to cycling and walking. And to those who complain this is politicising transport and infrastructure, I say this has always been the case. The building of infrastructure has always had a political component, and we shouldn't shy away from that discussion. Importantly, once a user is taken out of the comfortable, isolating cocoon of a car, they become much more aware of the surrounding environment and other people. And it's this immediacy which demands design that is safe, enjoyable, inclusive, durable, and beautiful. For a bridge designer, the sensitive needs of pedestrians and cyclists are the greatest and most rewarding challenge. My professional interest lies in the social benefit created by bridge design as much as their architectural contribution to cities and to landscape. And when good social intentions and beautiful design combine, the results are wonderful and long-lasting, yet supremely functional. For designers, I think this duty to society demands thinking beyond the footprint of a building to consider how the surrounding environment is changed by the building. For designers of infrastructure, it requires imagination far beyond the basic requirements of moving people from A to B. Bridges create networks, and it's this positive interaction of people, spaces, and places which create successful cities. Now, this has been recognised by many for a long time, from Jane Jacobs to Jan Gale, and he stated, only architecture that considers human scale and interaction is successful architecture, culminating in his famous call, first life, then spaces, then buildings. The other way around never works. Looking to building for the future, it's helpful to consider what societal needs may be and what we can do right now to fulfill these needs. These include to provide continued access to mobility without a heavy carbon cost, and there are many ways to achieve this. First, by applying the carbon hierarchy to the assessment of a project at its outset. It should be possible to rule out the building of structures that are unnecessary. And this is not as extraordinary as it sounds. There are many examples of bridges intended to satisfy a political need rather than an actual need, where equivalent functionality could be achieved with little or no carbon cost. Examples including this one: reallocate existing highway space to active travel uses, as campaigned for in New Zealand on the Auckland Harbour Bridge. This is both the easiest physical change and the most difficult political change. It imposes behavioural change upon society at large, and in doing so it risks short-term and indiscriminate inconvenience. Yet the reallocation of existing road space, especially on totemic structures like bridges, is powerful medicine. It should be implemented with careful anticipation of the consequences. But the radical temporary changes we saw in Paris, in London, in many, many cities around the world during the corona pandemic, many of which remain in permanent form, demonstrate this approach is valid with sensitive leadership and with clear communication. Indeed, according to the inspirational Chris and Melissa Bruntlett of the Dutch Cycling Embassy, and if you haven't heard of them, look them up because they are really cool, Paris's cycling revolution shows no signs of slowing. Each new network piece appears, and with that, more cyclists come. They now outnumber cars by 50% in Paris. From the early 1990s to the present day, driving within the city limits of Paris has fallen by 45%, public transport has risen 30%, cycle use has increased by 1,000%. These are truly impressive figures. They're extraordinary, and they are replicated around the world. I mean, we all know about Amsterdam, we all know about Copenhagen, but they are now increasingly happening all the way around the world. I've never really understood cycle counters. It's one of the things that bugs at me. The live data they provide is completely meaningless to the person passing it, but how much more meaningful and rewarding it might be if they counted down from a target which represented something tangible, even motivational, like the carbon cost of a cycle bridge, or the daily energy consumption of a school or hospital. So each trip had a meaning, and some cyclists were incentivized. I think the visualizing of carbon and energy consumption at an everyday level would undoubtedly help society address its reduction, even if this does perhaps risk combining the right thing and the right reason. This was brought home to me recently by an apparently innocuous electrical earthing problem, which I confess I know nothing about or understand nothing about, on our bridge in Stockholm. There's been a dispute over the interpretation of applicable standards between the contractor, the commissioning authority, and the operator, and it's prevented trams running on the completed structure for over 6 months. Now, if each of these 2.4 million lost passengers had made their notional 20-kilometre round trip by private car, the carbon cost would be at around 8,000 tonnes. That's a significant proportion of the embodied carbon. This illustrates how short the carbon payback period can be for infrastructure where there is strong demand, and I firmly believe that good active mobility infrastructure can help induce demand, just like we've always known that building more roads increases more road traffic. The decision to provide new infrastructure doesn't necessarily mean building anew, of course, and there are increasingly numerous examples of existing infrastructure being rehabilitated and repurposed, and the most well-known example is obviously the High Line in New York. But every city has similar examples of smaller, discrete bridges whose refurbishment could provide significant new value without the heavy investment in carbon of a new build. This is the Castlefield Viaduct. It's less than a mile from here. I think it's that direction. And if only their potential could be identified early enough, and designers were encouraged to think of them as a creative catalyst rather than a liability. I mean, I think this is potentially a business opportunity for all you engineers. With some joined-up thinking, the regular structural health monitoring inspections that are undertaken by and for bridge owners should be an easy source of such data, and which structures can provide new life. The world of infrastructure lags behind the world of property in this innovative thinking. And London, I know firsthand, has recently seen a dramatic increase in the retention and the extension of buildings, often exploiting their original structure with intelligent analysis to extract greater load-carrying performance in combination with new lightweight components. And this trend seems likely to accelerate due to financial incentives based on carbon performance of buildings. This is the award-winning High-Low building in the City of London. It's by Horden Cherry Lee Architects with engineers AKT2. And it retained the existing 16-storey tower, extended it upwards by 70%, sideways by 24%, more than doubling the net lettable space. And in doing so, saved more than 35% of the carbon of a new building. I'm reporting rather than verifying those figures. And ever since the understanding of material properties allowed bridge engineers to design structural forms that span further than individual components, the importance of achieving lightweight solutions has been evident in the best examples of bridge design, at whatever scale. And this is my favourite kind of example, illustrating the state of the art of the 19th, 20th and 21st century bridge engineer at the Firth of Forth in Scotland. Where we have obviously the neighbouring cantilever and suspension and cable stay bridges. At the smaller end of the bridge design scale, there are opportunities to exploit materials with lightweight and high strength, and these provide new build solutions which improve connectivity with an emphasis on minimum carbon cost. Knight Architects' design of the modular flow footbridge system for Network Rail will replace numerous unsafe and remote rural level crossings in the UK by combining innovative design with intelligent use of carbon, hemp and glass fibres. This was conceived through a research and development programme in close collaboration between client, designer and specialist suppliers, and developed entirely through the corona lockdown. So the behavioural change of how we work together in that very short period of time was really quite significant and is a catalyst for the future. The prototype achieved a 40% reduction in cost and was half the weight of an equivalent standard steel bridge. Reducing that superstructure weight allows further reduction in foundation design. These are built without concrete. They are removable. So as well as shortening program and reducing the size of construction risk, there are consequential benefits all along the piece of reducing the weight. And you don't have to look far along the lines or the routes of historic railways to find redundant structures with great potential. All across Europe, anywhere where the railway has had such a big footprint. But if they're only seen as a burden and not as an opportunity, then the result is wasteful. And it can be as disastrous as this infilling with 1,000 tonnes of concrete of the Great Musgrave Bridge in 2021 for completely spurious safety reasons. This bridge, which had lived for rather a long time, was no longer apparently capable of carrying 40-tonne trucks. It was infilled with 1,000 tonnes of concrete at a cost to the public purse of 124,000 quid and blocked off a potential route for people and nature. There was wonderful outcry amongst the industry as a whole. The action was undone last year at a further cost of £431,000. But the situation isn't unusual, and there are hundreds of historic bridges which are suited to repurposing. Whether as a whole or by combining robust existing foundations or support piers with new lightweight spans. Working with S82 Consulting for Clackmannanshire Council in Scotland, we proposed the reimagining of the support piers of the 1885 Alloa Swing Bridge to carry a replacement deck for pedestrians and cyclists. 50 years after the railway and the bridge deck were dismantled and removed, the carbon invested in the original construction can still provide further returns for society. In this part of Scotland, the natural obstacle of the wide River Forth currently means local amenities must be accessed by car. It's a huge barrier to movement, but a replacement deck would allow would link people to between work and education, and it would link them with zero carbon travel. It's a really obvious approach. Sometimes we might even see a departure from absolute lightweight solutions towards those which provide robust structures and embrace the carbon storage potential of timber. An example is our 2010 competition-winning design for Margaretengürtel Bridge in Vienna with structural engineer Knippers Helbig. This was planned to link two urban parks across a busy traffic corridor and provide a cycle route between parts of the city. And the linear form evolved from the landscape, and its massive minimalism was conceived in counterpoint to the architectural language of the neighbouring 1899 station designed by Otto Wagner. The design of the structure combined a glulam core of spruce lamella and a large outer layer for durability and protection against moisture. The bending radii of the glulam layers followed standard production techniques, and areas of peak stresses are reinforced with threaded stainless steel rods. So although unbuilt, several examples of this structural concept have subsequently been completed by Knippers Helbig, including a family of spans at the Remstal Garden Show in May 2019. And the development of traditional timber building techniques demonstrates elegant and environmentally responsible construction, being both a carbon sink and an efficient use of renewable resources, if they're providing a useful function. And using a locally common building material in Austria with a relatively low processing cost, it was estimated the superstructure would contain around 800 tons of stored CO2 within the almost 1,000 cubic meters of wood, and would use a fraction of the energy in construction of an equivalent concrete or steel bridge. Returning to the highest function of bridges to improve people's lives, our future bridges must prioritise the needs of the weakest in society to provide safe, enjoyable routes, spaces and places, and to improve accessibility and social inclusion. This can be a major challenge for us, particularly in a world where topography and the conflicting demands of existing infrastructure force bridges up and over, resulting in excessive gradients or distances. But unpicking existing routes, such as this addition of a ramped cycleway access to the Lower Lee crossing, can provide new links in urban settings where land ownerships and building structures otherwise appear to dictate solutions. There are loads of really inspiring examples on this, including the bowline at Bowling Harbour by Rankin Fraser, landscape architects for Scottish canals. This combines the creative reuse of heritage infrastructure with new infrastructure. It provides an accessible and enjoyable new community asset. It includes shops and facilities along its route. It benefits nature and biodiversity. So this kind of creative reuse both accommodates change caused by ageing infrastructure and helps to accelerate change towards a less car-dependent, low-carbon urban transport system. And while looking to the changing future, we also have to deal with the immediate consequences of the climate emergency. Extreme weather events are now measured in decades or even years, so we must ensure what we design now is ever more robust and reliable. Opportunities must be imagined where the benefits are multiplied, and this is well illustrated by our Nostrop Bridge, which was completed in 2017 as part of the Leeds Flood Alleviation Scheme. By providing a replacement crossing of the River Aire, using the new weir structure to provide supports for a series of lightweight steel structures, a section of the National Transpennine Trail was made accessible. A modest new landmark was added, and that provides connectivity and enjoyment for recreational and commuter users alike. But the approach to multiplying the benefits of a project is unlikely to be realised by conventional linear thinking. Collaboration between architects, engineers, landscape architects and provocateurs of all kinds encourages a creative dialogue that can result in innovative solutions, which combine form and function to address multiple challenges and solve problems far beyond their original parameters. In doing so, much greater value is achieved for the financial and carbon investment. The Daphne Shippers Bridge by Next Architects with Arup in Utrecht integrates a lengthy approach ramp with the landscape surrounding an infant school, creating a unique sense of place, a strong identity of connection with the neighbourhood. The fact that cycling is at the heart of the solution is arguably natural to people in the Netherlands, but maybe not to the rest of us, or maybe not yet. Many of these examples have ingredients that are important to cycle users, and especially to the huge number of people who are cyclists to be. In other words, who don't yet cycle because they find it potentially intimidating. Perhaps the most powerful factor in securing their commitment is providing separation from highway modes. Our Abbey Chesterton Bridge in Cambridge, which is part of the new Chisholm Trail, means cyclists don't have to share the road with motor vehicles all the way through the city centre of Cambridge. The two slow modes, cycling and walking, can coexist safely. And this kind of coexistence has been referred to in Denmark as forgiving infrastructure, with comfortable widths and gradients that allow novices to coexist with experienced users, and which accommodate the speed differential between with some kinds of e-bikes and scooters. The sensitivity of users means the cycle infrastructure design should not be thought of as a type of highway design. That's really important. Identifying that cycling is a social activity, so space must be allowed for cyclists to ride side by side, is one of the key observations in the Dutch Crow Guide. And this might result in slightly wider bridges, but the change in the increase in comfort will attract many more users and reduce the carbon payback period. We shouldn't be mean. Linking new residential developments across highways it's essential that we provide dedicated active travel provision from the outset, so people are not dependent upon cars. I sense that we're running towards the end of time, so I shall try to accelerate. But the phrase "coming from the wrong side of the tracks" illustrates the division that we inadvertently create while trying to connect. This remains true for flora and fauna, just as for people, and is being addressed in the increasing popularity of green bridges like this one in Canada. And it's quite an interesting diagram of how infrastructure really has imposed itself on the landscape. But by providing continuity of habitat, re-establishing routes severed by linear infrastructure, we can start to undo the damage. And building on the idea of forgiving infrastructure, could we not follow the example of visionary cities like Oulu in Finland and plan for year-round use, even when they have extreme weather that the most of us don't really experience? Why not generous infrastructure that not only facilitates energy-efficient, healthy and socially valuable A to B journeys, but is regenerative in its aims, so that it supports thriving flora and fauna, sustainable drainage systems, provides trees for shade, undergrowth for habitat, as well as providing common places for people to meet and dwell. In other words, in everything we design, how much bigger can our thinking be? Many of these ideas are familiar and proven because they were in place before the rise of the private motor car. But returning to them means reversing the decades-long growth of car traffic in cities. Yet, as we saw during the corona pandemic, beneficial change requires strong leadership at a city level. As bridge designers, we can support our politicians and clients to create positive briefs and encourage the sharing, celebration and rewarding of the best examples. So when it comes to creating sustainable urban environments now and for the future, it's not enough to only be good designers to enjoy our jobs in quiet luxury. We must be advocates, ambassadors and agitators for change and for good design in all areas of life. In other words, we must exercise at least reasonable skill, and we have to actively care. There will be resistance to give up what we're used to, so it must be easier to change than to not. And this can combine elements of both the carrot and the stick, for example, by providing segregated cycle infrastructure, and through imposing penalties for private cars. But this must be part of a comprehensive transport strategy which ensures generous public transport so as not to adversely affect poorer people. As highway traffic reduces, road space can be increasingly returned to pedestrian and natural use, creating an attractive flywheel effect so that even the highest density parts of cities, such as the Aldwych in London, which was thought long lost to pedestrians, can be reimagined. What seems impossible or hard at first will become easier as the benefits accrue until it's the norm, and society, politicians and asset owners all embrace this opportunity to change. But of course, all these excellent, inspiring examples come from ordinary individuals working collaboratively to make ordinary projects into the extraordinary. Working together, we are greater than the sum of our parts, and together we are creative, curious, committed, but above all, we care about design. It's why we're here. We care about the planet, we care about places, and we care about people. On that last note, about collaboration and people who care, and just a slight digression, I'd like to pay tribute to the specialist steel fabricator SH Structures. They recently went into administration. This is our Taplow footbridge, which, like our Campbell Wharf, Nostrop, Elaw, St Phillips, Abbey Chester and Merchant Square bridges, which are all in that presentation, stand due to their excellence in craftsmanship and construction. The end of SH Structures is a really sad moment. I pay tribute to them and to everyone else who helps realise the vision of clients and designers. We are in the middle of this process. The clients above us, we have to inspire them and drive them to actively change. But we also need the specialists and the contractors and the fabricators to work with us. And the demise of really skilled outfits is a shame. We have to support them too. Thank you. I hope you enjoy the rest of the symposium. I'm delighted to be here with my colleagues Hector, Tom and Laura. Come and find us as well, but go and see Nicola first.